If you hang out in enough US men's national team forums and comment sections, you're bound to run into some hot takes and some wild theories about everything from player development to formation selection to even roster selection. Today we are diving into the hottest takes and the most popular, unpopular opinions in an episode that I am calling US men's national team conspiracy theories. So comment section, strap in because it is about to get weird. We're talking about the false nine, we're talking about three in the back, and we are talking about MLS players versus European-based players on this episode of the Yank Report. What's going on? My name is Sam. This is the Yank Report. This show we talk about US soccer, and if you're into US soccer, hit that subscribe button and hang out with us. And if you're into hitting buttons, go ahead and hit that like button while you're at it. I don't know if this is true or not, but I hear that every time you hit the like button, Chris Richards hits another line-splitting pass for Hoffenheim. That's just what I heard, so I mean, try it out. We'll see what happens. Now let's get into our list of conspiracy theories and popular, unpopular opinions, and the first one is a doozy. The false nine. The false nine first entered the lexicon for soccer fans whenever Pep Guardiola's amazing Barcelona team employed the tactic where Lionel Messi lined up in what was nominally a striker position but dropped back into the hole and created all kinds of problems and overloads for the defense. And since that happened, it has been the white buffalo for soccer fans. It's something that's talked about all the time. We should use a false nine. We should use a false nine. But it's rarely used for European teams. And there's one really big reason why. It doesn't work. And I know what you're saying already. Sam, what about Barcelona? It works so well for Barcelona. And yes, if you have Lionel Messi, the best player in the world, who can drop into the hole and be an amazing playmaker, and he can also score a ton of goals himself, and he can also take on the whole team and score goals, and you have prime Xavi, and you have Iniesta, and you have David Villa, and you have one of the greatest lineups ever put together, yeah, you can make it work. But if you don't have all those things, it hasn't really gone so well. And we've seen a bunch of other teams try it. We saw Cesc Fabregas try it with the Spanish national team in the 2012 Euros, and there was mixed results. We saw Thomas Müller try it with the German national team. Shoot, we saw Dortmund try it recently whenever they've had issues with strikers not being available. And what usually tends to happen whenever you don't have Lionel Messi playing the position is that you have a midfielder in there, and it becomes a very defensive formation. I remember the Spanish national team got criticized heavily, and they said they were playing a 4-6-0 formation with Cesc Fabregas, and they were trying to make a million passes before scoring goals because you just don't have that front man that's able to put things away and put a lot of pressure on the defense and make things happen. But the real reason why you don't see more false nines in soccer today is because, as so often happens in soccer, the false nine didn't create a new position per se. What it did was evolved an old position. These days, strikers are almost expected to be able to drop into the hole, to be able to play with the ball at their feet, and to be able to combine in the build-up as well as the attack. Whenever you look at top-level strikers for top-level teams, almost all of them show the ability where they can come back and be a part of that attack. It's just a part of the evolution of soccer. As the years go by, players are expected to be better with the ball at their feet and better athletes. I mean, you just have to look at the goalie position. 15 years ago, goalies really didn't have to use their feet too much, but then Manuel Neuer came along and became the striker keeper, and all of a sudden, every top team in the world has a goalie that can play the ball with their feet, can ping it all over the pitch, and all of a sudden, if you're a goalie that can't play with the ball at your feet, now you're a liability. It's just how the game works. Despite all this, the false nine is still really considered like the holy grail of soccer, and soccer fans still clamor for the opportunity to see their team with a false nine. And all this false nine hysteria really got brought to a fever pitch recently whenever Christian Pulisic in an interview said that his new role for Chelsea is what he called a false striker. Now, realistically, Pulisic's not playing a false nine. If anything, he's playing in an advanced attacking midfielder or a second striker. Either way, you're not really doing what the false nine did because you have a strike partner or you have players very close to you who can handle the responsibilities of a striker whenever you vacate that position. Pulisic's more or less just creating space. But anyway, he said false striker. He said, we all heard him. He said false striker, and therefore he's a false nine, and the U.S. men's national team should play with a false nine, right? No! Guys, the false nine is just a weird, complicated position, and even when some of the best teams of the world have tried it out, it's really just been as a stopgap until they can get a better striker to come along and play that role. To think that Greg Berhalter is going to abandon his system, the system that he's implemented for the last few years and the system that he's implemented at all the youth teams for U.S. soccer, to play this role that Christian Pulisic's not even really playing for his team, it's just very unlikely. Now, maybe you play it for a game, and I understand there's people saying, like, Sebastian Lletget played that role, and maybe Jesus Ferreira can be considered a false nine, but that's just sort of how national teams go. Sometimes you don't have other strikers available. But to think that that's going to be the system moving forward, it's just very, very, very unlikely. I'm sorry to say bad things about the false nine, guys. Next on our list of conspiracy theories and popular, unpopular opinions is this idea that the U.S. men's national team would be best if they ran a 3-in-the-back system with 2 wingbacks on the outside. And on the surface, this system makes a lot of sense. I mean, we saw Gio Reyna perform really well as one of the attackers in what they call a reverse Christmas tree. We've seen Christian Pulisic, whenever he said he's playing the false striker role, that's more the reverse Christmas tree again. So there's a lot of teams are using this right now. And also, if you look at our center back position, it's one of the weakest positions on the squad. And you would also be allowing Anthony Robinson and Serginho Dest to perform as wing backs. And as these are both really attacking players with a lot of speed, it would really work for their skill set and minimize their defensive responsibilities. So for a lot of reasons, this makes a lot of sense. However, whenever you put 3 center backs into a game, that means you have to take out an attacking player in order to make room for a center back. So essentially, we would be removing, say, Gio Reyna or Yunus Musa or somebody like that in order to make room for maybe a Chris Richards or a Mark McKenzie or a Matt Miazga or an Aaron Long. And honestly, that just doesn't sound like good math to me. I would rather have Musa or Gio on the field than any one of those center backs. And then the other thing that I pointed out in the false nine discussion is that this system is not something that Greg Berhalter is being really flexible with. It's something that he's instituted at all the youth ranks. It's something that Jason Kreis uses with his teams. So it's something that the national team is trying to instill at a young age in these players and bring up all the way to the senior team. So the idea that we would just throw it all away just because we're having some center back deficiencies right now, it seems a little far-fetched. We do need to find a center back pairing for John Brooks, and because of that, we're going to be seeing a lot of center back auditions over the next year, and maybe Berhalter opts to go with 3 in the back for some games just because he gets an opportunity to look at one more center back by doing that, give more players caps. I don't know. It's just a thought. And then maybe, if we're in a tournament or something and there's card accumulation or somebody gets hurt or is sick or something like that, 3 in the back's a way we can go. But as far as totally changing the system and moving in a different direction, I don't see it happening, even though there are some benefits, as I said. And guys, last but not least, this is probably the biggest conspiracy theory in all of U.S. soccer fandom. So pull up your chair and turn up your speakers. This is the idea that Greg Berhalter and MLS and U.S. soccer are all in cahoots to prioritize selecting MLS-based players over European-based players in order to promote the league and make more money for the league. This theory probably reached its height during last year's Gold Cup whenever Berhalter famously selected a lot of MLS players over some European-based players. I mean, we had Dwayne Holmes and DeAndre Yedlin and Josh Sargent all miss the roster for some MLS counterparts. Now, in hindsight, looking back, Dwayne Holmes recently was attacked by his head coach, Wayne Rooney, for his effort that he's giving, and he was shipped out on loan. DeAndre Yedlin has sort of fallen off a cliff and is the forgotten man in U.S. soccer. And Josh Sargent is still probably the most controversial figure in U.S. soccer. I swear, guys, I get a comment every morning. I wake up to a comment about whether Josh Sargent is or isn't good. Now, we haven't gotten a ton of data because, as you know, 2020 was a complete wash for the U.S. soccer world. We only got 4 friendlies, and of those, one was what you would call a senior team, and it was only one MLS player that made the trip. So we haven't really got to see what Berhalter's true number 1 roster selection is. But all signs point to the idea that Berhalter's going to play the best players in the best positions available, whether they're European or MLS. And all signs are pointing to this idea that it's going to be mostly European-based players. There's going to be a couple of MLS players on the roster in the 2022 World Cup, and that's just because I don't know of many nations at all that can put together a full national team roster without a couple of players from their domestic league. And we might even see some starters from MLS, maybe, just depending on how things shake out. But I really haven't gotten any indication that there's going to be preferential treatment given to MLS players. And if anything, we've seen the exact opposite, as during this window, we've seen a ton of MLS players that are U.S. men's national team hopefuls. You know, Daryl Dike, Paul Arriola, Jordan Morris. But even if he does pick some MLS players, I think it's time that we put to bed this idea that MLS players just can't compete on the international level. I mean, in just this past year, we've seen so many big-name players sign contracts with European teams. I mean, Brian Reynolds was the one with all the headlines, but Caden Clark is another one. And we've just been seeing that MLS is capable of producing talent that can compete at the highest levels. So if an MLS player comes along and has really taken the world by storm, it shouldn't be a complete shock if the national team manager wants to put that player straight into the national team. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. And if you like this video, hit that like button. It helps so much. My name is Sam, and this is the Yank Report.